Our next session is going to look at the challenging time ahead for business, especially for transatlantic business. And we're delighted that we have a very strong business panel, both the IDA and InvestNI represented, which is a sort of a peace process all of its own. But when people said, how will you select the business representatives on the panel, we said, well, look, they have to have created, at least 100 jobs in Belfast. So it was a high bar. Of course, the two business representatives, Sean Kelly and Bill McKiernan, have created many multiples of that. Sean, through his former involvement with KPMG in Belfast and across the island, created many hundreds of jobs, especially for young professionals and young graduates. And Bill McKiernan, if he didn't start the fintech revolution in Belfast, he certainly turbocharged it when he brought CyberSource to Belfast in 2009. Both are very prominent members of the Ireland Funds today and deeply involved in trying to make sure that the transatlantic two-way street of investment and trade comes back. So we wish them well in the time ahead. I want to hand over to Lisa Maloney from the Irish American Business Chamber and Network, which is a fabulous organisation set up by Bill McLaughlin from Philadelphia. It holds the biggest business luncheon in all of America. Is held every February, the Ambassadors Luncheon in Philadelphia. So we're deeply grateful to the Irish American Business Chamber and Network for their support. So I give you Lisa Maloney.
Great, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. We have so much to talk about, so I'm going to just jump right in. The U.S. and the Isle of Ireland benefit from a robust mutual existence in areas of commerce, culture, and education, scientific research, a lot of stuff that we've been talking about all through this campfire. This robust U.S.-Irish relationship is a two-way street, as Martine mentioned. So to help us understand how robust this is, we've got Ivan from the IDA and Stephen from Invest Northern Ireland. Can you two walk us through the nature of this relationship? For instance, how many U.S.-owned businesses are operating in Ireland? How many people are employed in Ireland, and so forth?
Yeah, hi. I go first. The peace process, Ivan, and I'll go first. We're the smaller part of the island. I guess, Lisa, the US is an extremely important source of foreign direct investment for Northern Ireland. In fact, it's our number one source. In Northern Ireland, we've about 1,100 international companies employing about 100,000 people. And of that, there's about 220 US companies employing about 30,000 people. So it's a hugely important foreign direct investor into the place here.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa, for those kind comments, and thanks to the organisers for the invitation today. I think you kind of capture it nicely when you talk about the cultural ancestral ties that we have between both islands. Rightly, there's a lot of focus on the Irish investment or the US investment into Ireland, and rightly so. It's of a significant scale. It's a huge contribution to the Irish economy, and we value it greatly, and we'll never take it for granted. But it's important to note that it's a two-way street, and there's actually a lot of Irish investment into the US. And then I think when you look at the facts and figures, and you see that US companies that do actually invest overseas in locations like Ireland are ultimately more successful, more resilient. They end up creating more jobs within the US and pay higher wages. So I think when you package that all together, it's a very robust commercial relationship that we have.
Yes, thank you. There are over 500 Irish companies with investments in the U.S., and those 500 companies employ about 110,000 people here. So you're absolutely right. It is a robust relationship. Bill, you founded a company that has operations in Belfast. Can you give us some insight into that experience?
Yeah, we were introduced to Belfast through I&I, and at the time we were looking to expand our development operations outside of the U.S. And so we started looking at Belfast initially because of the engineering talent that was available on the island. And it really was on the island because a lot of our engineers came from the Belfast area, but many came up from the south every day, and they commuted. While we like the talent a lot, we also like the work ethic of the Irish. The shared culture and the language were important to us. And then ultimately, I think the clincher for us was that because this was going to be a mainstream software development lab for us, not just doing low-end maintenance, we had to send our senior engineering team over to the new lab quite a bit in the early days. And we had been looking at putting a lab in either China or India. And when we started talking to the senior engineers about, spending all this time in this new lab, and we brought up the concept of going to Ireland, they were much more enthusiastic about going to Ireland than going to China or India. And what makes that especially remarkable is that a lot of our senior engineers were Chinese and Indian. But it really was a very successful operation. And now that the company's owned by Visa, that lab has continued and is still a very critical part of the Visa development organization.
Great. And thank you. And Sean, the reverse for you are involved with CRH, and they have, they're an Irish company, but they have US operations. Can you maybe talk about give us a glimpse into their US operations?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Thanks for asking me to join. Yes, you mentioned 110,000 jobs, people employed in the US by Irish companies. CRH employs over 25,000 of those. I sit on the board. We're the largest provider of asphalt for roads in the United States. And we are also the second largest building materials company in the world. So making a significant investment in the US, and when you think about the discussions that are ongoing around stimulus as we move to the next phase of the pandemic, the investment in infrastructure is going to be key, and obviously CRH and similar companies will be key to that. And I think the importance to that, when you listen to Steve, Ivan, and Bill, the importance of that two-way street is, as you look at where we are today, the importance of trusted trading partners is really important. The importance of trusted, partners, period. But particularly trading, as you look at supply chains and you look at security around your supply chains, be it physical or digital, being part of that two-way flow of trade, I think will be critical as major companies and smaller companies start to look at what their business model is going to be in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And Steve, Invest Northern Ireland is involved in a lot of helping the Northern Ireland companies come into the U.S. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do, Lisa. The US is such an important market. For the clients that we work with, they export about 2.3 billion pounds worth of goods from Northern Ireland into the US. And to put that into context, that's the same as we export to the rest of the EU, excluding the Republic of Ireland, which is obviously our closest neighbour and very important trading partner of ours. So the US is hugely critical, and we do everything we can to try and help the Northern Irish companies get over there. They like it because, as a few of the contributors have said before, the common language. There is a friendship between the two countries and a trust that is built up in those ways. And we find lots and lots of companies really now starting to go, okay, well, we've been selling in the past. How do we start to put down roots in the US? And so we've been using our teams in the States to really try and help them find homes for their US operations. If you take, for example, Almac, who are one of the Northern Ireland's biggest pharmaceutical companies, now a global drug discovery company. They currently employ about 1,500 US staff based in Pennsylvania. I've just signed a 2-year R&D project with Merck. So we're really trying to help those Northern Irish companies integrate themselves into the United States.
That's great. And Almac is also a very important member of the Irish American Business Chamber in Philadelphia. And we welcome that relationship with Almac and with other Northern Ireland and Irish companies that want to come and do business in Pennsylvania. So against this backdrop of the two-way street and mutual investments, what is the impact, economic or otherwise, of COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic on these transatlantic community? We're so used to hearing in everyday news bad stuff about COVID, and it certainly is bad. But there does seem to be a silver lining in that our U.S. Irish business relationships are contributing to fight against this virus. Ivan, can you speak to maybe the pharmaceutical medical device arena?
Yeah, no, I can do, certainly, Lisa. Just before I get into that, just to give you a sense then of the US investment that is in Ireland, we've got 245,000 employees of multinational companies in Ireland, 1,500 companies themselves. Last year we just completed our 5-year strategy, and it was our most successful in 5 years. And we're in business now 70 years. So we managed to generate over that period 1,200 new investments and over 100,000 jobs. So if we dig a little deeper into those numbers, then over 760 of those companies are US companies, and they employ about 160,000 people in Ireland. So that's significant. But what's interesting about those is that almost 60% of those numbers then are employed outside of Dublin. So that really helps with our remit to create a balanced regional development within Ireland. And then for every 10 jobs that a multinational company creates in Ireland, 8 more are created within the wider economy. So that'll just give you a sense of the huge economic impact that FDI has in Ireland. I think, to then look at the COVID and what's happened there, I think we've all seen at an early stage, how difficult, it was on the supply chains globally, and how important supply chains are and how global they are. And unfortunately, in some parts of the world, the supply chain probably didn't hold up as well as it should have, particularly in regard to PPE. But the supply chains in Ireland were very strong and resilient, and actually were so strong that they probably allowed for more capacity to come into the network. So take, for example, Medtronic, one of the largest medtech companies in the world, have a facility in Galway producing ventilators. At the start of the pandemic, they were producing, several hundred ventilators a week. When it hit, and by early March, they had, doubled their workforce in Ireland, went to a 24/7 shift. And then by the end of that, they were creating 1,000 ventilators a week. So I think that kind of gives you a sense of how companies have responded, how our clients have responded in Ireland to the pandemic.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. I've also seen another impact that I've seen is the necessity of some businesses to pivot or adapt their businesses as a result of COVID-19. Steve, have you do you have any examples of this? That question will go to Steve and to Ivan.
Yeah, Lisa, probably the best known one, and that's been quite publicised quite a lot, is obviously O'Neill's Sportswear here, based in Strabane, over in the west of Northern Ireland, and famous for making GAA football jerseys and footballs and selling those all around the world. They really pivoted.
I have my Mayo jersey.
Very good. They really pivoted and moved into making scrubs for the NHS. And what's really interesting is that Kieran Kennedy, who runs the business in Northern Ireland, explained that traditionally the NHS here were buying their scrubs from China, and they were buying them at a very cheap price. But obviously they couldn't get supply at the height of the pandemic, so they started off and they were just keen to buy scrubs from anywhere. So they were paying more to get them from 80 miles down the road. But actually what happened was that the nurses and the doctors, they realized that they really preferred the feel of them. They felt that they were much more elastic and movement, and actually the quality felt so much better. And the NHS themselves found that instead of just a £5 scrub and being thrown away or being washed maybe 5 times and laundered, actually the O'Neill's product could be washed and laundered up to 30 times. So I think the whole pandemic has really forced companies into pivoting and looking at different ways and different supplies. But it's also really, I think, forced organizations who are purchasing from the supply chain to look at different modes and really try and move away from that, cost being the lowest form.
That's great. Ivan, do you have a similar example?
Yeah, actually, I do. I have 2 examples. I suppose the first is just as recently as yesterday, Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, which is one of the leading biotech companies in the world, announced 400 jobs investment in Limerick at their existing site. That company is in Limerick 6 years now and has invested $6 billion and currently employ 1,000 people there. And why that's important is that they're actually freeing up capacity within their network here in the US to make space for COVID products, and they're moving that capacity to Ireland. So that's a good example of how kind of businesses of that scale have pivoted. And then I think if you look at it on the reverse side of, an Irish company that has kind of pivoted their business is a technology company in Waterford called Nearform. They have developed a contract tracing app. It was launched, I think, in early July in Ireland, and within a week, 1.3 million people had downloaded the app. I think it's closer to 2 million now at this point. And I think I read somewhere that it's the most successful contract tracing app in the world at this point in terms of its download. So they now have actually signed a commercial agreement with the state of Pennsylvania, and I think that's going to be rolled out next month. So that's kind of two examples, two-way street of companies pivoting to the virus and the pandemic, the situation we find ourselves in.
Yeah, no, and that's a great example. We are we're waiting for that app here in Pennsylvania, and we've been hearing about it and very excited about it. Sean, can you maybe address technology and the use of technology that we are, the fact that we're doing this campfire via Zoom and how that's affecting businesses and transatlantic relationships?
Yeah, Lisa. Yeah, and I think we don't have to discuss for the people watching all the implications of Zoom and the things like that. But really, what we've seen, I think, in many instances, is the acceleration of trends that were happening anyway. Trends towards, say, virtual meetings, artificial intelligence, robotics, and that's that we're seeing an acceleration of that. And on all the ancillary things, Bill McKiernan can talk much better than I can around, cybersecurity, cyber digital transactions. But all of that is accelerating, as you say, and I think we've heard great examples from Steve and Ivan about companies that are adapting to the new environment. And technology is critical, right? Because we're now going to have looking at how we can operate more efficiently, more effectively in the times of social distancing and not as much travel. And that creates, I think, a tremendous opportunity for the island of Ireland because of, as we said at the outset, the skill sets that have been built up over the years on the island in those key technologies, fintech, cybersecurity, food security, all of those things. And they will be coming to the fore. I think the critical piece, though, as we see those opportunities, are the challenges in the short term to take advantage of them. Like, there's no doubt that many of the people watching will know business is a lot about personal relationships and interaction, and it's very hard. You can do some business virtually, but there's certain things you just really need to be in the room with people to get business done. And we're going to have to look at how we can do that going forward. But clearly, technology, we've seen an acceleration of the key trends, and it's going to play a huge part as business models shift.
Great. And how about investing, Bill? How do you see COVID affecting venture investing and growth equity investing in the United States and Ireland and across the EU?
Well, the good news is that prior to COVID, venture and growth investing in both the US and Europe had been very strong. So there was a lot of momentum going into the pandemic. Clearly, COVID is disrupting many industries, but it's a tale of two cities. Hospitality and travel are really in trouble. It's going to take a while for them to recover. But technology, healthcare, fintech are booming. And ironically, COVID is unquestionably a net benefit to many of these tech companies because, as Sean mentioned, it's dramatically accelerating these trends that have been underway for some time. For example, the CEO of PayPal just said the other day that he thought COVID would accelerate their customer acquisitions by 5 years. The same thing is true in e-commerce growth. The UK went from 20% e-commerce penetration to 30% in 2 months. And e-commerce has been around for about 25 years. So they saw sort of 12 years of e-commerce growth happen in 2 months. So the acceleration is just remarkable. there's been a record amount of venture capital raised over the last year, and most of that will be deployed in the next 2 to 3 years. So there's a lot of capital sloshing around. The European growth equity market is very hot right now. There are a lot of big winners out there. It's a Dutch company, ADN, which raised about 1.3 billion. It's now valued at, I think it's over 7 billion. UK clothing company, Farfetch, raised about 1.4 billion. They're valued at over 5 billion. So we really are seeing some world-class companies being developed in Europe. So while there's a little bit of a slowdown in equity, venture and growth equity investing because of the pandemic, I'd expect this to be short-lived as investors really look to capitalize on this dramatic acceleration of trends that COVID is causing. There are going to be some huge winners and losers, so investors are going to pile in and try to identify who those winners are and take advantage of that. So overall, from a venture and growth equity investing standpoint, I'm very bullish.
Great, thank you. And Sean, sort of going off your comments with respect to technology, that technology can only go so far, and relationship building is still very important. What role can business network organizations like the Irish American Chamber do in this environment, in these challenging times? Like what can we do to continue fostering and helping to bring new jobs to Ireland and Irish companies here to America?
Yeah, no, Lisa, it's a great question. I think it's really all about, focus and prioritizing. It's very difficult to, obviously it's difficult to meet in person, but even to make contact with the right people in the right organizations. I think you've heard from all the panelists, the opportunities are out there, but there are challenges. I think, organizations on the ground, business organizations that can help businesses network, but network with the right people, which is really important for Irish companies coming into the US just because of the scale. Like who do you talk to? Where do you go? Which cities? That's where the organizations working with Irish companies coming in can help direct them to and facilitate those meetings, but also create awareness in the US of the opportunities that you've just heard about. These are tremendous opportunities. And we do have the advantage, going back to, really our theme, that trusted business trading relationship between the US and Ireland is going to be critically important. And you'll see that as trading links are forged as we move forward.
That's great. Now, before we wrap up this panel, I was wondering if each of you can share one piece of advice that you've learned over the last, say, almost 6 months during this COVID situation. Ivan, do you want to start?
Yeah, I guess it comes back to relationships. When the time when we could meet face to face, it's just been much easier to have those strong relationships in place and to move them to a virtual setting. And at some stage, we will get back to a place in a post-COVID world where we can meet face to face again. But I think it's important to keep those relationships active by moving them to a virtual setting. And this is a great example today of doing this panel. And turn on the camera, look at people face to face. And I think that's a good way of just kind of keeping that connection alive until we can shake hands again and meet in a safe setting.
That's great. How about you, Steve? Last few minutes.
Yeah, I'd echo Ivan's comments. Probably the biggest learning for me personally, and I guess it's an internal one for us as an organization, has been the importance of communication. And we have a team, an international team of 110 people distributed all around the world in 23 locations. And actually, I've spoken to them and we've spoken to each other far more during this crisis than we did whenever I was on a plane jetting off to see them around the world. So I think the one thing it's really taught me personally is the importance of communication.
Great. Bill?
Yeah, I would say don't be consumed by the doom and gloom of the current environment. This too shall pass. And when you're thinking about starting a business or investing in a business, I like to use a hockey analogy, which is don't skate to where the puck is, skate to where the puck is going. And as we talked about, there's so many trends that are being accelerated by COVID. And these trends will create some great opportunities for entrepreneurs and smart investors. So skate to where the puck is going.
Perfect. And last word, Sean.
I'm going to take two, like the good accountant that I am. I think you've heard a lot about adaptability and agility, and I think learned that, the adaptability. The second thing that struck me, and you really heard it in some of the examples that were given, business is looking at returns for shareholders, but I think we've also seen the side of business that says, we're part of our communities. We have to support those communities. So be it, as we've heard, making scrubs. You heard from the centres earlier about businesses contributing to food banks, opening up. I think we've seen that side of business that a lot of us knew was there, maybe was hidden, but has really come out. And the good managers know, and the good business people, all people know, the relationships you forge in hard times, people will remember those. And I think the contribution that business has made in helping us on both sides of the Atlantic work our way through this, I think will put all of us in good stead, and I think we'll continue to see it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Sean, Bill, Ivan, and Steve. One thing I know for certain is that America's relationship with the island of Ireland, even in a post-COVID world, will continue to thrive because the ties remain so deeply rooted, strong, and are ever growing every year. So I really appreciate all of your time and your energy and your preparation with me for this panel. So thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. You're a wonderful chairwoman of that session, a very difficult crew, but thank you for marshalling them. Wonderful. Bill in Nantucket, Sean in Connecticut, Steve in Belfast, Ivan in Dublin, or part south, I'm sure. Thank you for taking part. As you know, this Big Irish Campfire is associated with Hinch Whisky. The good news is that today, the 20th of August, Chopin Distributors received the first shipment of Hinch Whisky into New York. And 30 bottles have the name of the Irish Echo office on it. Now, unfortunately, they're big bottles. But when I get the miniatures, I'm going to send you a little miniature each. So thank you very much. Stay safe. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa, and our solidarity greetings to Philadelphia. Thank you, folks.
Great.